I've been on 3 different companies' product development teams, and I can tell you, it's hard as hell to come up with fresh new ideas. But when you get one, you get excited, and the biggest challenge then is just getting a park to be that first one, to be the guinea pig to ride it and say, yeah, I'll take one of those, because that's always challenging. Everyone likes the second and third of something. The first is always the tough one.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
Doing great. Always glad to hear that. Question for you, Matt.
Yes.
Have you ever spieled at a ride or attraction or anywhere else in a park as a guest?
Oh, that as a guest part really throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing. You mean other than like to myself, or like if I was going along with whatever spiel it was just to annoy other people?
No, it would have to be like on a microphone. People are looking at Matt. You are talking to an audience.
I don't think I've ever done that. Have you?
Yes.
Well, do tell.
There was one time on Jungle Cruise where I was invited to be the guest skipper. And in addition to telling Jungle Cruise jokes, I started telling jokes from Paddle Wheel Excursion at Cedar Point, despite the fact that I was at the Magic Kingdom in the jungle. And by the way, I never worked at Paddle Wheel Excursions. I just wrote it enough and I knew the spiel, and I had always wanted to deliver that spiel. And that was my one opportunity to do it. And they gave me a little card, guest skipper that they probably give to, 6-year-olds normally.
Right.
Yeah. It was one of the best days of my life. Definitely like top 10.
Was that a guest skipper, please don't come back and tell those jokes again card?
It was a restraining order, I think.
Right. Yeah. You got to meet Disney security. How fun.
No, it was the regular. They're like, okay, here you go, little boy, and like, go away now. Yeah.
That's funny. So no, I have not. But why do you ask?
Because our guest today also has. There was one time he was on the Jersey Shore and he convinced a carnival barker to hand over the microphone. And when asked if he had worked in the amusement industry before he got a job with IAPA, he said, well, kind of. And he told that story of a couple of moments where he briefly worked in the industry as a guest.
And what I think is so fascinating, and by the way, our guest is Pete Barto of PB Amusement. And what I think is so fascinating is that his career ultimately turned into a sales career and building relationships and serving others. And that's what you're doing on the microphone, right? You're trying to get people to come over and play the game and see if you can win and all those type of things. So, that to me seems like it's kind of in his DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that sales mindset. And what's really interesting about Pete's career as well is that he's worked for IAPA, he's worked for Hershey Park, and he's worked for multiple ride manufacturers. So he kind of has this triple crown of the operator, the supplier, and the association, which impacts his perspective and his lens on the industry, which ties in very nicely with what he does with his company, PB Amusement, which is helping attractions and parks select the best investment for their next ride, attraction, or experience.
And he kind of called himself a couple of different things, right? He called himself kind of a broker or a rep or a consultant or advisor. And he really does all of those things. I think it's fascinating from a business standpoint, how Pete described how he's kind of letting PB Amusement sort of evolve into what it can be. But also, I'd love to see his iPad that said all those different things about what he's good at and what he would love his his business to be, because I can't think of a better way to kind of tap into those things that you're passionate about, because they may seem dissimilar at one point, but then when you get into the position of actually being in a role where you can kind of determine your own future, then you can kind of pull things together and say, well, I like this and I like this and I like this. And then you put them all together and that becomes your career. So it's kind of cool to kind of hear that story.
For sure. And the way that his business came about, it was not just created on a whim. You mentioned the word evolution, of how he wants it to evolve, and just the way that it has evolved into the business he has now is completely about the relationships built along the way. So that's one of the big themes of this episode, is that this in a way is, I think, a lesson in networking. He talks about how he enjoys doing business with friends, and you can just hear his passion for the industry and the parks and the experiences, as well as the people behind all of that as well.
And so I think, without ruining the relationship that we have with our listeners and our watchers, why don't we go ahead and get to this interview with Pete?
Let's do it. Hey, Pete, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, I couldn't be better if it were Tuesday. I hope it's Tuesday. I don't know. With the pandemic, you never know anymore.
There you go. Exactly. Days of the week. When, what is that? What does that mean?
Exactly.
So Pete, to get this kicked off, can you tell us about yourself? Give us a quick intro and a little background in your career.
Sure. I've kind of had an interesting career and an interesting path to this industry. I started my career in marketing and public relations, working for McDonald's restaurants in Central Pennsylvania and Domino's Pizzas corporate office, and Kiddie Academy childcare learning centers, and I was kind of fumbling around, and I had success, but there was something I was missing on the marketing end of things. And I think it really showed itself when I eventually found my way to my position at IAPA, where it's that understanding of marketing versus sales, and seeing with marketing, you generate that excitement, but you don't always get that reward at the very end, or at least you don't get to see it firsthand. So my very first sales job actually was with IAPA, the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, which everyone I'm sure knows. And I got hired back in 2005, I believe. And from there, it just kind of took off, from being the vice president of conferences, trade shows, and sales, got to know a lot of the folks in the industry, moved from there to Premier Rides, had a chance to work with Hershey Park in their group sales side. So I got the association side, the manufacturing side, and the park side. From there, had an opportunity then to work for S&S Worldwide, S&S Sensei Technologies, had a very successful run there. And then with Extreme Engineering in their group. And from there, I said, maybe it's time to go out on my own. And so here we are.
And we definitely want to hear about PB Amusements. And I got to say, whenever I say that or look at it, I think peanut butter, but I know it's Pete Barto.
Gosh, you figured it out.
But Pete, let's go back to when you started working with IAPA, because, so many of the people listening to the show and watching the show are in the attractions industry. So was that your first launch into the attractions industry, is working for IAPA?
Yeah, I mean, directly the direct influence was that way. Before that, I'd been working for Billy Casper Golf Management. So I had always been around the hospitality industry. And again, couldn't necessarily quite find my home. I couldn't figure out what I was missing. And so funny story, I was living in Leesburg, Virginia. If you know that area, the traffic from there to Alexandria, Virginia is absolutely horrific. I think it's the second worst traffic other than Los Angeles. So I saw a position that was available, talked to a buddy of mine, Corey Connors, who used to work in government relations for IAPA. He got my resume in front of some people just as hey, take a look at this guy. He might be of interest. Went down there for resume practice, honestly, or interview practice, to go down and just say, I said, I'm not going to drive 55 minutes each way every day for a job that, what is this, a carny job? I don't even know what this is. And went down there. I had the interview, and I remember driving home and I called my wife and she's like, how'd the interview go? And I went, it went really, really well. I think I want this job. And from there it just took off. I mean, the passion that had been somewhat hidden, or my love of the industry, which started from a very young age, just it all came together with IAPA, and getting a chance to get to know the operators, the manufacturers, the suppliers, the people in this industry, and learning that there were a bunch of passionate, crazy people out there just like myself. It was like joining a club.
So prior to that, today you are considered, an expert in the industry, and you know so much about, both the operator and the supplier side. And of course, we're going to talk more about that in the next few minutes. Did that all start with your career beginning with IAPA, or were you a consumer of the product beforehand, or had you worked in the industry in some way, shape, or form, or was it kind of all brand new to you then?
Well, indirectly, I guess I worked in the industry, and I'll tell you a couple stories, and I still have invoices out for payment. But one of them was I grew up going down the Jersey Shore and going to Morey's Pier and Wildwood area every summer. I'd save all my money up, and we'd go up on the boardwalk, 2 or 3 times a week while we were down there. And I used to always go and sit by the Barkers that ran the horse race game. I think it's Bob's Space Racers horse race game where you roll the ball in. And I, in the middle of the day, it's kind of quiet, not quiet, but not real busy on the games. And I'd convince the Barker to let me run the microphone and sit there and go, okay, who wants to beat the 12-year-old out here sitting at the... And lo and behold, I'd start bringing people in to play against me, mainly because I wanted to be able to win some prizes. So that was kind of my unofficial first job in the industry. My second one was probably when I had a season pass at Hershey Park in high school, and I'd go to the park and we ride a bunch of rides, and then I'd go out and ride the tram car back and forth from the parking lot to the front gate. And again, I would convince the operator in the back that had the microphone that was giving the tours that, hey, maybe I could give this tour. I've ridden it 3 or 4 times with you. If you look up to your left, you'll see the Milton Hershey Skull. The Milton Hershey Skulls. So I had the whole spiel down, and ended up, having a lot of fun. And again, I wasn't getting paid. I was just doing it because it was fun to do, and being a part of it. And before I had no idea there wasn't jobs in this industry. To tell you the truth, it just like amusement parks just happened to be there. They were always there. So. I've had that love for them across the board. It's not just a singular ride type. It's it's coasters, it's dark rides, it's games, it's the food. Every bit of an amusement park gets me excited, and always has since I was 4 years old. And my father used to do a full park buyout of Hershey Park, and our family would go there every summer. So it's always been ingrained in me, and a passion, a love, and to be able to then work in this industry is just unbelievable.
That's so cool. I love that story, and how you convinced all those people to hand the microphone over to you, right? There's got to be some parallel in what you do now, just in terms of, I don't want to say convincing, but in sales, right? Mm-hmm. And in marketing, there's part of that in telling the story and bringing people in to be part of that story. So let's go ahead and transition to talk a little bit about PB Amusements and how that came about, and kind of where you are and what you're doing today.
Sure. I mean, again, tying into that passion for the industry. Again, I didn't, when I was thinking about creating a company and going out on my own, it started actually about 2 years ago when I actually formulated the LLC and said, okay, I want to do something eventually myself. I want to be my own boss, if you will, and go in the directions that I want to go, and do the things I want to do, and work with the people in the industry that I want to work with. So 2 years ago, I started it. I started getting, I started getting a little more excited about it. I started, as I did a lot of travel for the various companies I worked for, I'd keep a little notepad of stuff that I like. Actually, it was my iPad, but I kept notes constantly of things that I like, things I'd love to do. Say, oh gosh, wouldn't it be great if when I launched this company, I did this or I did that. And what I came to the conclusion was that I wanted to be more than just a independent sales rep, representing, a few companies or whatever, and trying to sell whatever those wares were. I wanted to be more of a consultant, a broker, almost a middleman. I wanted to be able to represent those manufacturers properly with the products that they were looking to sell, but I also wanted to be able to be talking to the park owners and the management team and be able to look them in the eye and say, this is really the best attraction for you based on the research I've done on your park. I didn't just show up and say, hey, what are you looking for? It was looking at their ride portfolio, looking at their some of their product mix, looking at what their competition had or is doing, and trying to understand from a park standpoint where they might be falling short. And it's kind of funny because every park is very different. And the final capstone project I did for my MBA that I finished up in 2017, I actually did a year-long study on determining how parks made their decision for purchasing rides. And unfortunately, the conclusion was there is no one formula. Unfortunately, there was no silver bullet, but there were some geographic, and there were some age appropriate things that triggered some consistency amongst parks. So I tend to bring that to the table when I talk to a park and share that information, because again, when I go to a park, I want to make sure that I'm not just asking something from them, but I have something to give them as well that they can maybe take and use somewhere in the park along the way.
Pete, can you share a little bit of the gap that you fill here in the sales process? When you talk about, the parks, there not being, one particular way to make that investment in their next ride or attraction or their next big CapEx project. But what is the reason to come to you versus putting out an RFP or going to all the manufacturers individually?
Sure. I mean, I think, one of them is actually, I hope the number one thing is trust, in that I've built these relationships over 20 years, and the people in this industry, I think they see the passion that I have, and the people in this industry that are dedicated to it are incredibly passionate. I mean, you guys are incredibly passionate ambassadors for the industry. And I think passion recognizes passion. And I think that's part of it. They know that I'm going to be doing things for their best interest. I'm going to be trying to connect them with the right manufacturers, the ones that if I owned a park, I would go and purchase the ride. I've been doing it for 15, 20 years anyway in the industry before I did that. I just wasn't getting paid for it. I would say, hey, oh, you're looking for a dark ride? Oh, yeah, go talk to this company or go talk to that company. Now I'm like, hey, wait, why don't I rep for you? If I'm going to be recommending you anyway, let's make this a little more formal. So I think that's part of it. And again, I think I'm bringing to the table a little more. It's not honesty, because I think the majority of the folks in this industry are honest and good people. I genuinely feel that way. But I think there's so much business to be had out there that everyone can be a winner. Everyone can get a ribbon. But I mean, I think everyone can really be successful in this industry. And I love seeing everyone be successful. It's just like when something bad happens in our industry, everyone hurts from it. And when something, if everyone is doing well and success is happening and the gates are cranking and new rides and manufacturers are challenging each other with new innovations, I think that's really where this industry can really grow and be more successful. And I like being a part of that. And I like being able to, where I am with PB Amusements, be able to shift my attention or shift that focus on maybe a product that is new, but maybe not as well known in the States or in North America or even in Europe for that matter. So I think that gap that I'm filling, to kind of come full circle with this, is going in with a lot of different products, but not necessarily those products being exclusive. So I could be recommending 2, possibly even 3 of a similar product or a similar footprint or similar THRC for a park that will meet their needs without having a conflict. And that's kind of the difference, I think. So hopefully that will drive it. And, I've always said that, I'm not a great salesperson, but I have a really good Rolodex. And I think I'm not a complete ass, so people take my calls. Sorry, mom.
It's funny you say you're not a good salesperson, because as I looked on your LinkedIn, every position says sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you translate the fact that you just said I'm not a great salesperson to the fact that you're in sales now, you're selling yourself, you're selling
Mm-hmm.
products, and that you've had all these sales positions? So is it not about being a quote unquote salesperson and being more of a, someone who advocates for relationships and trust building and things like that? So where do you kind of stand on that?
Yeah, 100%. It's all about relationships in this industry. I mean, people always, it's so funny. We have the greatest jobs in the world. I mean, you go to a cocktail party and tell people what you do, and they go, "What? That's a job?" And I go, "Yeah, they actually pay me to do it too." And I think that those relationships are key. I mean, you have to be in front of the parks. You have to be spending time, and you have to be sincere about the way you're doing your business. You can't fake this. I mean, the people in this industry are so passionate. They love their parks so much. They're so proud. And the manufacturers themselves are very, very proud of the product that they're creating. It doesn't matter if they created it in their garage or if they got a massive factory. There's an immense amount of pride. And I think I tap into that kind of pride, because I'm proud to represent some of those marks. I'm proud to be or proud to be able to have the relationships I have with the people out there. I care about them. I care about their families. It's more than a job to me. I'm not trying to make a $1 million out there. I want to make a good living and really and be proud of the work that I do, and stand at the exit line as people get off the ride that I sold, and watch the smiles and the waves and the giggles and all those things. That gets me, there's my goosebumps. That gets the goosebumps for me when I can say, that's my ride. That's my ride. Guess what? It's going to be there for like 40 years, maybe more. That's my ride. So that's what really keeps me going. That's what gets me excited. And I think that the parks also recognize that I'm going to be there beyond the sale. I usually try to make at least one, if not two stops at a park during the installation. You don't want me turning the screw. Trust me. I don't turn bolts. I don't turn screws. I'm not good. And if I am, you're in trouble. If that's what's going on. But I want to be there to listen to how the experience is going, because that's a piece that's outside of my control. But I always say when I sell a ride, I said, look, I'm not one that disappears. I'm the squeaky wheel. I'm not the guy that's going to be able to fix your problem, but I'm going to be able to get to the person that fixes your problem, and I'm going to be in their ear constantly until they fix whatever that issue is, because I want you to buy 20 rides from me across 50 years, not one ride and done. So I'm there through the end of it. I even go and visit the parks and ride the rides and check on the rides that I had sold for other manufacturers that I'm no longer working for anymore. And you can talk to a number of parks about that. I mean, I'm still connected to those rides, even if I don't work for that company anymore.
It's awesome. So one of the things you mentioned earlier, and would love to bring it back up, is that in the study of one of the factors that go into making that investment in the next amusement ride, that there isn't the one silver bullet or the one like magic pill there to do it. What are some misconceptions that perhaps the industry has that when it comes to investing in rides and attractions, as far as things that maybe people don't necessarily realize when making these types of decisions, or that aren't necessarily brought up in the early conversations?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest misconception is the amount of input that comes from all parts of a park. And again, having worked in a park, I can tell you that it's everything from guest services to maintenance, to obviously the operations and things like that. But an example is downtime. When you're looking at a ride, downtime is a killer for parks, especially if you're in the middle of the summer and you're a high volume park, and the signature ride that I guarantee whoever's in there talking to guest services is saying is the whole reason they came to that park, for that ride, it puts a lot of unnecessary pressure on a park. So it starts with the ride operators getting treated. Why aren't you riding a ride? Oh, this ride's always broken. And then the maintenance people come up, and the maintenance people are getting chewed out by the ride operators. And then they're going back and talking to their people, and guest services is getting hit up with people looking for, free tickets because that particular ride is down. All those factors come into play: the maintenance cost, the annual replacement. How reputable is the company that you're purchasing from? Are they going to be here 20 years from now, let alone 5 years from now? Because the parks aren't moving, so if all of a sudden they can't get parts and service, I think, that's a big problem. You need to be able to have you need to have that reputation that, you're going to be taken care of for many, many years. You're not just buying a fly-by-night product. So I think that's a big part. I think the other big probably misconception is all of those other decisions that come into it. I mean, obviously, number one is, you want to move your gate when you put a ride in, but it's how you're moving your gate that sometimes is important. For instance, again, one of the things I saw was the demographics, and this was again about 5 years ago, so we're probably living it right now. I should probably check to see if their projections were correct. But when I was looking at what was determining the decisions by parks for rides, I was looking at the number of family rides that were being out there, and specifically rides that were 36 inches and 39 inches in height. And the reason for that is during that time from 2015 to 2020, and through 2025, the number of families with a child age 2 to 5 was increasing by, I think it was 10%. Now, it didn't mean they didn't have a teenager in the family as well, but think about it. I don't know if you guys have kids or not, but certainly young kids, they dictate where you're going and what you're doing. And so if you didn't have attractions that met that need, or the lines were too long for those attractions because all of a sudden there was an influx of 2 to 5 year olds, which is that 36 to 42 inch height, you could potentially be losing the business. So I was asking a lot of parks when I went around to say, what are you seeing longer lines? And they were saying, yeah, it's on a lot of our kiddie rides and stuff like that. We're seeing longer lines. So what that means, another couple of years, now you're going to have those then becoming, the tweeners and, in the teenage years, and you're going to see that same kind of push go. But I think that's a big part of how they're factoring in their decisions too, is are we hitting the right audience that's going to bring the rest of the family? Because again, it might not necessarily be the big wow, but it's something that is specifically lacking for that park that they need to address. I mean, we'd all love to put in $30 million attractions every year, but that's just not realistic.
Yeah. Well, it's not realistic, and it also doesn't hit your demographic, as you were saying, and how those demographics change over time, and the age groups that are coming in. I'm curious, Pete, you've kind of alluded to all your different areas in the industry, IAPA and the manufacturer side and the operator side. So can you talk a little bit about how at least those three different experiences now sort of inform your decisions, or how those kind of lead you down a certain path, maybe understanding, kind of where people are coming from many different angles?
It's funny, as I've kind of, built PB Amusement, and I say built because I'm kind of letting it run the course that it wants to run, in that I have a lot of different weird expertise, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. I mean, I've been so fortunate to have worked again in all these different places behind the scenes, here and there, with the parks, with the associations, learning sitting in on even the education sessions and things like that at the various shows, and putting together the leadership conferences and all those kind of things like that, all kind of built up to allow me to have a little different perspective, to understanding the full circle of why maybe the park is making that decision, why they're choosing this manufacturer over something that I have. I get it. I don't get upset. I never get upset when I lose a sale. It's like, hey, life happens. You're going to buy something else at some point. Hopefully the next one will be from me. But I think that, having that understanding and then shaping that and learning from it as you go forward is definitely the way to go with it. So, I mean, I think those things have really played a major role. And, the last thing is, when I worked at Hershey, For those that work in parks, they're familiar with the term August crunch, which is, that those last couple, 2 or 3 weeks of the summer when all the college kids go to school and there's no staff. And at Hershey, every single employee from the CEO down is out running rides or cooking burgers or whatever it is to keep the park open and operating. And that included me with group sales. And I still from time to time will volunteer my time because I think it's important to go back and understand and see your rides in action, see them operating, see how the guests are strapping into a restraint, see how again, everything about a ride, so often from an engineering standpoint, and I'm not an engineer, but the engineers are behind a computer and they're looking and saying, this number does this and this and this, and this is the best way to do it. But when it's in practical use, sometimes you don't see that. And I think being able to, having had that experience working with Hershey and then periodically going back and helping out during August crunch to run a ride or a couple of rides, you understand where some challenges are with ride designs. And I think I can bring that to the table to the operators when I'm discussing, say, I understand what you're saying. That first year is the most important. Hey, I usually say within 6 months, they're going to know the ride better than the manufacturer anyway. And that's the truth because they're working on it every single day, every day. They know exactly where the pain in the butt is part of that ride.
That's really interesting. I would love to go even a little bit deeper into kind of calculating the ROI of the investment, because buying an amusement ride is, I can't think of that many more things that are all that much more expensive than this type of purchase. Maybe a submarine, maybe maybe an airplane, right? The ROI calculation, I've got to imagine has got to be pretty tight, right? And you mentioned kind of the gate, and obviously, turnstile clicks, I'm sure is a huge component of it. But even pulling back as far as just other ways to be able to recoup that investment, does food and beverage play into it? Does merchandise play into it? Souvenir photo, all of that, into saying, here's what you can expect in terms of your payback and how far it'll take to recoup this.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, just like any business, any kind of add-on purchases are going to be the key to any business. Not just that's why at the grocery store you got a couple extra candies and snacks right there at the checkout counter. I mean, part of the reason for putting an attraction in is if you get more people through the gate, more people are going to buy sodas, they're going to buy more food, they're going to buy souvenirs, all those kind of things. So that does factor in. And every park has an understanding of their per cap spending, and they know that every time someone comes in, on average, that person is going to spend X amount of dollars in the park. So if the average spend is $10 per person, just throwing a number out, and I get an extra 100,000 people, do the math. We just made an extra, I need to do that, $1 million. I actually had to think about that for a second. So I think that, and for gated parks, that's definitely a little more difficult, especially like I said, when you're looking at different segments where maybe it isn't a gate mover, but it's addressing a certain part of your park that needs attention so that it doesn't get dropped off the grid. But that's obviously the per cap spending. You want to see it, or maybe you want to look at that product mix of what is selling. So if you put in let's say you put in a kiddie ride as your attraction that year, are you seeing an uptick in kids meals being purchased? That's one way that you can see, did this become a profit generator? And depending on the park, some of them are looking at that average ticket. And again, this goes back to my McDonald's days of, at McDonald's, the average ticket at the time, again, I'm going really dating myself, but the average ticket at the time when someone went into McDonald's was something like $4.36. If a Happy Meal was being purchased, and at the time Happy Meals were $1.99, as again, dating myself, I don't know what they are anymore, that average ticket was like $9.50. And it's like, how do you get $9.50? Because that kid isn't coming in by themselves to McDonald's. They're coming with a family and they're all purchasing something. So that's why I was saying, when you're looking at certain ride attractions, yeah, the $25 million ride is a big bang and it's going to get a lot of people through the door. But sometimes those smaller attractions or kids attractions are actually going to help you from a profitability standpoint better than the big rides, depending on what audience you're trying to tap into.
Sure. So Pete, I was pretty fascinated by what you were talking about earlier about, looking at the demographics of the ages of people, and then that could inform you of what sort of attractions or experiences to include. What other trends are you seeing? Is it about, virtual reality? Is it about, big thrills? It is about families. I'm curious, what are those other things that you might be seeing that, 10, 15 years down the road, we should be looking at to prepare ourselves now to be ready for that kind of audience?
Mhm. I think, it's funny you mentioned VR, and I think VR took probably a pretty big hit over these last 2 years with COVID, and again, more cleaning protocols and things like that. So anytime you're having to wear goggles or something like that, and I sell some products that have that, there's a little bit more of a staffing commitment required and cleaning supplies and things like that. And I don't think a lot of these cleaning protocols are going to go away anytime soon as a result of COVID. With that being said, I think AR has some really interesting potential, especially when you're talking about reinventing maybe an older ride. I initially felt VR was a great way to take an old coaster and turn it into something new and fancy. But I quickly realized, probably the first time I wrote it, that a lot of ride attractions it's a social event for people as a family. Think about it, when you get in line to ride a ride. Oh, I want to sit with this person, or I want to sit with that. There's a battle of who's going to be sitting next to who, because it's a social experience. So if you can do it with AR, where you can still see that person and you're both looking at whatever the weird world of whatever is going on in theming, then I think that works. And I think that could have incredible applications. And I think that's where it's really going to take those rides that we're using VR and take it to that next level. Beyond that, it's about the creativity. I mean, you can only go so high and so fast and so far, and we're getting really close to some of those limits, I think. And I've been on 3 different companies' product development teams, and I can tell you, it's hard as hell to come up with fresh new ideas. But when you get excited, and the biggest challenge then is just getting a park to be that first one, to be the guinea pig to ride it and say, yeah, I'll take one of those, because that's always challenging. Everyone likes the second and third of something. The first is always the tough one.
Well, the first one often can be associated with downtime and working those bugs out. So kind of what we were talking about earlier, to say, kind of when making that decision of there's a lot of benefits of being the first from a marketability standpoint, but then looking into the operational and maintenance aspects of it, that obviously it needs to balance out. One thing I'm curious about too, I kind of going back to the selection process, is which do you think is more important for a park? Is it loyalty to a manufacturer, or is it diversity and having a wide range of different types of products in the park? Because if I think about it, if I were to walk into a park that was all B&Ms, it would be awesome. But at the same time, there'd be a little redundancy from here and there. And I feel like a lot of parks, they have a very good variety of manufacturers, and ultimately that can, I guess, cater to multiple demographics. But at the same time, from the business ends of it, I imagine the manufacturers want them to keep coming back for more. So curious as far as which is more important.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because I've always, again, one of those cocktail party questions I always get is, what's a roller coaster cost? I'm like, well, what's a car cost? Because it's the same kind of thing. Each car, trucks, and they all have different ways that they drive, and they have different ride experiences to a degree. Some are $150,000 and can drive themselves, and others are a used piece of junk that just get you from point A to point B, and that's okay. There's something there for everyone. But with that being said, I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. I think you can't stay. I mean, I think there's familiarity. That's probably the biggest thing when you're talking about buying from the same manufacturer or the same sales rep, because the service you're going to get, the parts costs, how that what's being promised and what's being delivered. Are they matching? Is there a drop off? They're advertising 1,000 THRC, but the real capacity on the ride is 300. Okay. You know, are those numbers real numbers? You know, is your salesperson just throwing whatever number that, you know, that they think could happen? And if you've ever operated a ride, most HRC numbers are just that, theoretical. Unless you factor in the flip-flop factor, which is, you know, oh wait, you got to take your flip-flops. Oh wait, can I have your phone? We got to put that over here too in the bin. And oh, you want to change seats now? Okay, gotcha. So, but I think the familiarity that might actually weigh a little heavier than in their decision making than mixing it up from a product standpoint. I think ideally, if you have a manufacturer that can meet your needs with a number of different rides, I think they're going to win, or they're going to at least get the first chance to earn the business. Ultimately, they're going to have to pick the ride that's right for them. But I think if things are close, I think you know, my experience has been you go with what's familiar and what you know is treated you well. And at the same time, if you weren't treated well, it can have the exact opposite effect, you know, where maybe you're not going to get that second shot because the first one wasn't what it was cracked up to be.
Yeah. Pete, you have something on your website that I wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about. And it was a quote from Milton Hershey, right? And he says, one is only happy in proportion as he makes others feel happy. So obviously you believe in that, you put it on your website, but can you tell us a little bit more about what that means to you?
Sure. I am an incredible fan of Mr. Hershey, and anyone who's not familiar with the story of Mr. Hershey and what he's done. And again, I live in the area, which also helps, but he was an extraordinary individual, and he found tremendous joy in making other people happy. You know, a lot of people don't realize that he wasn't a person that went out and tooted his own horn. I mean, when he donated his money to and set up his foundation back in, I believe it was 1935, about 6 years before he passed away, he donated that money without any fanfare. Nobody even knew that he had set up this thing, and he moved in and began living above the country club in a little studio apartment above the country club, because he just wanted to bring that joy. He wanted to bring that feeling of family. He's always been, I mean, he's an idol of mine. I mean, that's why you'll always hear me refer to him as Mr. Hershey, because that's the level of respect I have for him. Every time I used to walk through the park, I'd do a little nod as I went past Mr. Hershey's statue in Hershey Park, because of the way that he made me feel. You know what? He made me feel that way when I was 4 years old going to the park. And, you know, that's the joy that I get from this industry. And that's, like I said, you know, money's one thing, but that, again, watching somebody come off your ride with a smile on their face and running around because they want to go ride it again. I mean, that it takes me back to my own childhood, every bit of it. I can't get enough of it. I still get those goosebumps when I ride up on a park and see the skyline and the signature rides and view. That's what makes me happy. I hope that someday, 50 years from now, someone will ride one of my rides and be like, wow, I wonder who built this, you know. You know, so that's what excites me, and I think that quote really captures it well. And when I first read it, and I have it on I used to have it on my emails too. I got to put that back on there now I think about it. It really captures the way that I see this industry and the way that I see how I'd want to be, how I want to be perceived at some point as well, whenever my time comes.
And that really should be how we all think of it, of being in this industry, of being it, you know, aligning it to the purpose. You know, we get so caught up in the day-to-day, the minutia and the economics and the business aspects of it, which obviously is extremely important, but to not lose sight of the purpose, and that is to make other people happy. So Pete, when you are visiting parks as a guest, what are you seeing? What are you looking for? What are you thinking? You talked about, you know, standing at the exit ramps and watching the guests get off the rides. Curious as far as what is the mindset that you have when you're walking through a park?
It's kind of funny, because now I look at them very differently. I am looking at, you know, footers. I'm looking at track welds. You know, I'm looking at the type of attraction. I'm looking at how they're handling customer service. I'm looking at how clean the park is, which is a very underrated aspect of parks. You know, you can tell it's always, you can't always tell when a park is really clean, but you can tell when one is not. And I think that's very, very, very underrated in terms of how people perceive their overall experience. For me, it's walking around and bringing that inner child back out. Again, it's that same feeling. I have it even if the park's closed and I drive up, I get excited. Think, whoa, what am I going to ride today? Oh wait, I'm not riding anything. It's February and it's 20 below and I'm in Calgary. You know, so it's one of those things that it's when I go to a park, I do admit that when I'm riding rides, I am looking at different components of the ride when I should just be enjoying myself. But that's become a new level of fun for me as well. You know, well, how's this launch system work? You know, what does the control panel look like? You know, I geek out into all that stuff. You know, what kind of cool food do they have here? What's that dark ride? What kind of, I wonder who built those automated cars. You know, every little bit of it. I've always just loved parks. They're my happy place.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that, you know, as you're looking at those things, the track welds and how clean the park is and their customer service, that's sort of the next level nerdery, right? Of being a theme park guy, right? I mean, yeah, there's people that love the rides and they're enthusiasts and they love to go on Orion 100 times or whatever it is. But to get into that level of detail, I think is to your point very, you know, earlier about the people that have the passion for it. You can walk through a park when it's closed and still enjoy that experience. I was at a park recently with a client and the park was closed and we were walking through the park to go to a training area. And they said, oh, by the way, do you want to see our new restaurant? And I'm, yes, of course, let's go see it. And I said, by the way, if you say, do you want to see? My answer is going to be yes.
Always yes.
I don't care what it is. Do you want to see our new trash cans? Yes. You know, but again, I think there's that level of passion and that level of interest and curiosity that really, you know, is contagious, and it's something that we all sort of share. And it gets back to your quote of, you know, passion recognizes passion. So I don't know that there's a question in all of that, but just more of a, you know, I wanted to kind of tag onto that. But maybe the question is, where do you take this passion now, right? PB Amusements is up and running. You've got your footing underneath. So where does this go now? Where does PB Amusements go from here?
You know what? Again, I'm going to try to let it develop and create what it should be, or what it wants to be, or what it can be. You know, the industry has been so good to me. It's been so good to me for so many years, and I'm so appreciative, and I try to give back wherever I can in committees and, you know, ASTM and any place that I think that I can help. You know, heck, I'm working on the golf tournament for, you know, with Papa and Niapa. Just that these are things that I can do. I know I can do them well, and I can help people and it'll raise some money for a scholarship fund. That's where I'm personally going with it. Where the company goes, I think it's, you know, I want to work. I've always said it's so much more enjoyable doing business with friends. So if that's friends on the manufacturing side or friends on the owner side, you know, I'm not going to be one of those ones that calls on every single park all around the world to get them. I'm going to focus on the people that I have really good, solid relationships with, that I can go and stand in front of them and say, hey, you know, heck, I called Brian Knoble today, just busting his chops a little bit, just because he was down in Florida last week. And I'm like, don't you have a park to open? Right. I wasn't, you know, looking to sell him anything at the time. Next week, maybe, but, yeah. But you know, it's, I want to go out and be that middleman, that representative, that consultant, that maybe they don't even know they want or need or have, but I'm going to provide that service anyway. And hey, maybe I'll get a sale here and there out of it. And that's, you know, keeps it enough to keep the lights on and, you know, set up the retirement fund at some point.
Awesome. All right, Pete, this has been so much fun. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. If people want to get a hold of you directly, if they want to learn more about PB Amusements, where would you send them?
Go to www.pbamusement.com and or email me at pbarto, PBARTO at pbamusement.com. Or just find me out there. I'm on goofy websites and Google searches. It's not that hard to find me.
Yeah. Good. Well, Pete, we will find you. Hopefully, we'll find you soon in person where we can speak and share some more stories. But until then, for everybody watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.